She's an unfettered and rebellious spirit, caged by a life in the rural countryside, a star-crossed lover with a life of adventure in mind, and the youngest of 7 daughters. Allow me to introduce Blair Campbell. Element Nature. Zodiac Aries, April 6th. Blood type B. One of the largest families in Alden belongs to Ashley and Sheila Campbell. Their youngest daughter Blair was the first citizen born in Alden proper and helped solidify the small settlement as a true village. Many in the village think of Blair as a testament to their growth and prosperity, and some of the younger ones, like Shane, even see her as a local celebrity. But Blair has always been restless. She loves Alden and the people who live there, but feels stifled in the Highland life. Especially when her biggest job is to be the caretaker of her brother, Danny, while her parents are both busy with work. For many years, Blair was solely responsible for Danny during the day, and the consistent surveillance left her very little time to express herself. It wasn't until Patty Smith was around 12 and Blair was 13 that she started to find some reprieve from her brother's needs. See, at the time, Patty was becoming one of the older children, and so was expected to take charge more often. This was honestly nothing for Patty. They were quick to offer Blair help with governing Danny, given his unique needs as a possible changeling. The time spent together watching Danny and Emil brought Blair and Patty close. It was odd, at first, because neither of them could understand why they felt so strongly. It was only while Patty was talking with Blair about how they wished their father would let them work the forge that something Patty said clicked. Blair started to see Patty in a different light, more like one of the boys than another girl. Something that at first made Patty shy and even nervous. Scared on occasion, but they quickly warmed to the idea. Blair became the only person who knew Patty's true desires, their secret, and it was at that moment that quickly blossomed into a deep admiration and love. But a love they couldn't outwardly display. Even as Patty got older, the others around Alden didn't understand Patty the way Blair did, and according to Patty, they likely never would. Once again, Blair felt relegated to a side role, but it gave her some kind of hope, drive, something to love about being in the hills, just being able to see Patty. The rebellious spirit in Blair won't be content with this arrangement forever. That's just not in her nature. But what does it all mean? Being a rebellious spirit? Well, similar to the girl next door, rebellious spirit refers to a shorthand form of character development provided in the framework of writing for centuries. The rebellious spirit is an individual who has a personal problem with society, to a fault. One large enough to make that person want to break all the rules, sometimes just because. Rebellious spirits go beyond the stereotypical rebellious teen, so don't let Blair's age fool you. It can include people who flagrantly violate the rules and social norms, act eccentric or weird, and often don't care what people think of them. They may be good, evil, or even neutral, but they are by definition chaotic. Note that this usually doesn't mean that the individual will lack their own rules. It's just that their rules tend to be different from those of everyone else in a given scenario. It'll usually be everyone else's rules the individual will be rebelling against, not their own. For instance, it's society's rules around Alden that keep her and Patty apart. Why wouldn't she rebel against that? Sometimes this sort of person is also an anti-hero. But now, what is an anti-hero? That's a term that gets thrown around a lot by people and usually associated with characters like Deadpool, Walter White, and Rick Sanchez. Anti-hero is a literary term that can be understood as standing in opposition to the traditional hero, i.e., one with high social status, well-liked by the general populace. Past the surface, scholars have additional requirements for the anti-hero. Some scholars refer to the Rancian anti-hero, who is defined by several factors. So this refers to Jean-Baptiste Racine, a 17th century French dramatist whose style focused around antiheroes and borrows heavily from the Greek tragedy. What's most interesting about Racine's style, perhaps, is his thoughts on love. For Racine, love closely resembles a physiological disorder. It is a fatal illness with alternating moods of calm and crisis, with deceptive hopes of recovery for fulfillment, with a final remission culminating in a quick death. The passion of these lovers is totally destructive to their dignity as human beings, and usually kills them or deprives them of their reason. The characteristic Rancian framework is that of the eternal triangle. Two young lovers, for instance, a prince and a princess, being thwarted in their love by a third person, usually a queen whose love for the young prince is unreciprocated. Blair, Patty, Tam, a triangle, unrequited love, and eventual death? No, I refuse to believe that. And then again, characteristics of this framework say that first, the antihero is doomed to fail before their adventure begins. The second constitutes the blame of that failure on everyone but themselves. Thirdly, they offer a critique of social morals and reality. To other scholars, an antihero is inherently a hero from a specific point of view, and a villain from another. I mean, in those days, what would you call someone who unironically would call herself a pirate?
I'm thinking to be a pirate, if we're actually going to do this then.
Typically, the antihero is the focal point of the conflict in the story, or at least the focal point of a conflict in the story, whether it's as the protagonist or as an antagonistic force. This is due to the antihero's engagement in the conflict, which is typically of their own will, rather than a specific calling to serve the greater good. As such, the antihero focuses on their personal motives first and foremost, with everything else as secondary. The history of an antihero goes back as early as Homer's Thucydides, but the term wasn't used until the early 1700s. Romeo's nephew, but mostly covering the heroes written by Lord Byron. We've mentioned Byron a couple of times before. He's my brother's favorite poet. I wonder what you think of Blair. Well, they are kind of similar. Well, critics described Byron's hero as a man proud, moody, cynical, with defiance on his brow, misery in his heart, a scorner of his kind, implacable in revenge, yet capable of deep and strong affection. When you think about Blair, she is moody and cynical at times, but she does have a strong and deep affection for Patty. I mean, also a lot of villains with redemption arcs could classify as Byronic heroes. What do you think? Anti-heroes usually have some fatal flaw. This relates back to the Greek tragedy's concept of hamartia. Now, hamartia is also used in Christian theology to point back at things like sin, the fall of man, weakness of the flesh, and so forth. But the origin is Greek tragedy. Hamartia means to err, or to miss the mark, and it's used to describe aspects of a character that lead to their potential downfall, anything from a loss of family and home to a loss of life. This most often befalls antiheroes because their departure from traditional roles of a classic romantic hero. For instance, hubris often elicits hamartia. With Blair having this moniker, she actually runs a stark contrast to Martin. Byronic heroes are like the backside of the coin when it comes to romanticism. Strangely, they're both the same sort of adventurous, strong-willed, and confidently skilled. Being the firstborn in Alden, Blair has learned a lot from all of her elders. Tassandra's strength, Olivia's will, and Sheila's carefree nature, not to mention her 6 older sisters. She embodies the message of unity that Alden offers to the surrounding communities, even as far as Glasgow. Because of that, it almost seems like a crime for her to stay in one place, constantly restrained to babysitting. I think what's most interesting about this, though, is that Byron actually included the framework for a heroine to follow this type of archetype. As typically in romantic literature, women are used as a story element, not often as the protagonist or antagonist, unless the conflict is around wooing that woman, like in Racine's works. Aurora Raby, in Don Juan, actually possessed many of the characteristics of a Byronic hero. In the poem, for instance, she's described as silent and lone. Having spent a life in isolation, much like Blair has in Alden, Aurora validates the assertion that Byronic heroes are invariably solitaries. She evokes an interest from those around her. Remember when I said Blair was seen as a local celebrity? That's the same description of fascination Byron drew to himself wherever he went. Aurora and Blair both have a mournful nature, with Aurora having eyes which sadly shone as seraphs shine. It's meant to express a despair with humanity, and is similar to how Byron describes Cain witnessing the destruction of humanity. Hamartia again. Wait, Byron met Cain? I've got to tell Andrew. Shoot, I forgot for a second. You're still here. Art for this week was by Shalak on Fiverr. I'll put a link to their business down in the description so you can commission a great artwork like this from him personally. His realistic pieces are just the best, and it really helps bring our story to life. Art for this channel wouldn't even be possible, however, without the help of our patrons. Monetization on YouTube is not enough to keep us going, so please follow the Patreon link down in the description to help Tales of Atonement keep going long term. We have a lot left to do and a big story to tell, and we simply can't do it without your help. Besides, there's a ton of extras only available on Patreon that won't be available for months on YouTube, if ever. Some of our great patrons include Pammy Poo, Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Morland, and Lunder Lumen. Thank you all for watching and supporting our story.